Well, hello everyone. Cliff Ravenscraft here, and I want to welcome you back to the podcast. This is going to probably be one of the most confusing podcast episodes that I've ever put out. However, I beg of you to stick with me to the end. By the end, this will all make sense, I believe. And I say that I believe because, well, I haven't quite yet finished the end of this. Oh boy, where do I begin? First of all, let me begin by telling you that technically this episode is what we call a crossover episode. I have a couple different shows, which if you don't know already, you'll learn about in a little bit. But anyway, I have several different shows that I produce, and this particular episode is going to be a crossover, which means that this podcast will officially be an episode of two different shows. So for example, this is going to be episode number 634 of a show that has up to this point been known as the Pursuing a Balanced Life show. That's getting rebranded to the Cliff Ravenscraft show. So officially, this is episode number 634 of the Cliff Ravenscraft show. But also at the same time, this is officially episode number 432 of Podcast Answer Man. Now, Podcast Answer Man will likely go back to its normal, regularly scheduled programming in episode number 433 next week. So don't worry, Podcast Answer Man is not changing to the Cliff Ravenscraft show. Although, what you may find out is that it almost did. I almost did the whole nuclear option on Podcast Answer Man as far as the podcast. And wow, if that blows your mind, you're in store for an interesting episode here. I just want to tell you, for those out there that wish that every single episode of Podcast Answer Man is all technical related stuff to podcasting, this episode is one of those episodes where it's all about me. And it's all about my story. It's about my journey. But boy, do I believe that this is something that is going to relate to almost everyone out there at some point down the road if it doesn't relate to you already. And it's all about achieving a level of success, doing something for so long, and then all of a sudden at one point you say, I kind of want to do something different. I feel like I need some new risk in my life. I need some kind of new, but I'm being called to something different. I feel like that was that season of life, and maybe my new season of life doesn't have anything to do with that. And that's been a little bit of a struggle for me internally. You're going to hear that very clear here. But before I play anything else that has been pre-recorded, I have to give you a little bit of a preface of what it is I'm about ready to share. So I woke up the other morning. It was Wednesday morning, January 6th at 3:30 in the morning, and I could not go back to sleep. I had so many things racing through my head, and I felt compelled to start moving forward immediately. And one of the first things that I felt led to do was to come down into my studio and record the very next episode of Pursuing a Balanced Life, which I had already, before going to bed the night before, decided that the next episode of Pursuing a Balanced Life was going to be rebranded to the Cliff Ravenscraft show. Now, what I'm about ready to play for you here is that recording, or at least what is the first 28 minutes of what I recorded that morning. One of the things that you're going to hear in here is me say something near the end of this recording about the possibility or the potential of completely breaking free from the brand Podcast Answer Man, or being known as the Podcast Answer Man, completely breaking free. And we're not talking like immediately, but even the idea of that maybe 10 or 20 years from now that I really have nothing to do with Podcast Answer Man. Just like today, 10 years later, I no longer have anything to do with insurance. For those of you that don't know this, prior to being the Podcast Answer Man, I was an insurance agent for 11 years. And when I left the world of insurance behind, saying that that's not for me anymore, I feel called to this world of podcasting. Well, I left the insurance world behind. And after 1 year of doing podcasting full time, I finally let all of my licenses to sell auto, home, life, health, and insurance, all that other insurance, I let all of those licenses lapse and cancel because I knew that that world was behind me. I'm moving on, and this is a new season of life. And I thought there might be a potential that the same could potentially be true of Podcast Answer Man, at least being the technical answers guy related to podcasting. Now, you're going to hear a little bit of that in this recording that I'm about ready to play for you. But I want to let you know, and of course, I'm going to come back after this recording and give you even further update. But the reality is that I have discovered even further clarity, and we're going to go through this entire process of how that clarity came about. But I'm pretty confident that Podcast Answer Man will be a part of my identity and potentially even be a part of it 10 to 20 years from now. What that will look like, I don't know. I have some ideas, but I just want to say that I do believe that there is a very real possibility that in the future, my identity will be way beyond being known as the Podcast Answer Man. When people talk about Cliff Ravenscraft 10 years from now, the first thing that comes to mind, I hope, will not be, oh, well, that's the guy who teaches everybody to launch a podcast. However, I do believe that when the name Cliff Ravenscraft comes up, some people will say that, but other people will say a lot of other things that I believe will be way beyond the technical aspects of podcasting. But also, a part of my brand may be this business that I have that is an umbrella that has multiple different things that are a part of the things that I do online and the ways that I serve and help people. And I'll get to more of that down the road in this episode. So I'm just going to go ahead and let you know what you're about ready to hear is the unfiltered thought process of what was going through my mind at 4:19 a.m. this past Wednesday morning. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode number 634 of this podcast. Cliff Ravenscraft here. It is currently Wednesday morning, January 6th at 4:19 a.m. as I sit in my studio. That's right. I've actually been up since about 3:10, 3:15 this morning, and I simply could not sleep. Why? Because for the last several days, I have been pondering all sorts of things. Now, if you listen to episode number 633 of this show, you know that I went through some pretty dark days, if you will, in December of 2015. I shared a lot of authentic and raw stuff in that previous episode. If you've not listened to it, I encourage you to go back and listen to episode number 633, and it'll give you a good preface for what's led to this episode, number 634 of this podcast. You'll notice, by the way, that I did not say welcome to another episode of Pursuing a Balanced Life. I'll just go ahead and cut to the chase and tell you that I am rebranding this podcast. It is the second rebranding of this podcast. This show started all the way back in 2006, early 2006, called the My Crazy Life podcast. And I think it was like episode number 398 where I transitioned and called the show Pursuing a Balanced Life. And starting effective immediately here in episode number 634, from this point forward, this show will be called The Cliff Ravenscraft Show. I know there's all kinds of thoughts that go through my head when I contemplate the change, but there is a reason for it, and it, I believe, will become evident either as I explain some things in this episode or as we just move along. Anyway, I'll get back to the rebranding, or at least the name of the show, in a little bit, I believe. I'm not completely sure. I don't know exactly where this episode's going to go, but I promise you this is a journey that felt so important for me to just come and speak from my heart about the future of what I'm thinking might happen this year, or at least what thoughts are going to in through my mind right now that will be the catalyst for whatever journey may be ahead, because I'm still not clear. But one thing is clear, is that some things are stirring in my heart, so much so that sometimes I just wake up and I'm like, I've got to write that down. and get back to sleep. And sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night like I did tonight, and I've got to go record an episode of that podcast. So, wow, where do I begin? I guess one thing that I could say here at this point is that for those who have been listening to this show for many years, and we've covered the fact that there are a lot of you who have been listening to this podcast for a very long time, you know that I have had this thing that I do at the beginning of a new year, giving the year ahead a theme, something that I believe is going to be an overriding theme for the year ahead. And I don't know why, but I guess I need to, I don't have a list in front of me of what all the prior years have been, but perhaps I need to go and look that up. Let me see if I can go do that real quick, and I'll be right back. All right, I am back. I have a list in front of me, and it took a whole lot longer to build than I had anticipated. But I did some research, and it looks like I started to apply themes of the year back in 2011. And I remember vividly that was the year of providence. In fact, I talked about the fact that was the year I was going to look to see the thumbprints or the fingerprints of God on all of the blessings and all of the provisions that were made for our family financially. I was going to put all of my trust in him. Not that he hadn't been providing all along, but that was going to be the year that I was just going to say, you know what? I do trust that God is the one who brings this providence in my life, that he is providing for us. And I'm going to look for that so that I don't misplace my trust in all of my countless hours of hard work and blood, sweat, and tears working around the clock. Because yes, hard work will certainly pay off and bring great rewards, but I wanted to get to the place where I could understand that it's possible to live a life where I'm not working myself, burning burning the candle at both ends of the stick, burning myself out. I wanted to know and confirm in my heart that God was really providing and that he was going to take care of it, even if I didn't work myself to death. And so that was the year of providence. And then 2012 was the year of even bigger dreams. I recall talking about the fact that, gosh, I had just achieved pretty much every goal that I had set out for the year before. I had met so many people, and it was the first time I really set about these goals, and I saw them achieved, and I realized God had even bigger things for me. He was just basically communicating to my heart. It's like, listen, the goals that you've set, you thought they were big, but they were no problem at all. They were no match for what I have planned for you. And so I want you to dream even bigger dreams. That's what I was feeling on my heart. And so 2012 became that year of even bigger dreams. And I remember 3 goals that I wrote down at the time that seemed just like, wow, I can't believe I'm even writing these down. At the time, my business income was right around, I'd say on an average of maybe $10,000 to $13,000 per month. And or maybe it was right around $15,000 a month. I can't remember. But I remember I wanted to raise my business income to $20,000 per month, minimum every single month. And I remember writing that goal down as a bigger dream. And then I remember writing down the 2 goals related to public speaking, which is land my first paid speaking gig and to become a keynote speaker. I'm here to tell you that all 3 of those dreams became a reality in 2012, the year of even bigger dreams. Now, I am almost positive that I gave 2013 a theme. I wasn't able to just find it through the show notes or the list of the titles of episodes of any of the podcasts that I have, but I'm almost positive that if I were to go back and spend probably days searching through the archives of content that I have in, where I talked in those episodes back then, I'm pretty sure that I would have called 2013 the year of margin. I can't confirm that, but I'm almost positive that 2013 would have been the year of margin, the year that I actually seek to work less and still remain as profitable or more profitable in my business and in other areas of investment in my life. I needed more space, more free time. I needed to not do as much so that I could give myself a little bit more breathing room in my life. I needed that focus, and I'm almost positive that I gave 2013 the theme of the year of margin. And then 2014, I do know, was the year of live events. I had this dream. Actually, back then, I had this dream of a conference, and I'll go ahead and tell you that a little bit about it. I had this dream that I would one day do a conference called the Next Level Conference, potentially. I think there's another conference out there that's already called this. But I had this dream of doing this Next Level Conference. And it would not be a podcasting conference, but it would be a podcast that was devoted to helping people live their life to the next level. And specifically, people who are either thinking about creating a business on the side, or people who have just recently transitioned into self-employment, creating their own business for the very first time, basically going through all the things that I did in late 2007 and all through 2008, 2009, and even what's brought me up to today, but to help people in the beginning stages of their entrepreneurial or self-employed business owning days. I wanted to have a conference where I could have a team of expert speakers and mentors in my life who have benefited me so greatly to come and help with inspiring and encouraging, educating all of these young entrepreneurs. And the goal and the dream was to have that event to get to the place where it was 1,000 participants who each paid $1,000 a piece to attend that event. And of course, that would be my first $1 million event. Now, it wasn't my goal to actually pull that off in 2014, the year of live events, but I did want to start doing some live events, and specifically things not directly related to podcasting. And that's when in 2014, I actually did come up with this idea called the Next Level One-Day Business Mastermind event. And I held 2 of those. And the idea was to get I wanted to know, could I get somebody to come to a live event, number one, that had nothing to do with podcasting specifically? And number 2, would those people pay $1,000 for a one-day event that I hosted? And I found in 2014 that the answer to that question was yes. I held a Next Level One-Day Business Mastermind in August 2014 in Dallas, Texas, one day before the very first Podcast Movement event. And then I held a second one-day business mastermind event in November of 2014 in Colorado Springs, one day before the Platform Conference in 2014. So that was the year of live events. I had hoped probably to do more in 2015, but everything shifted for me for 2015. 2015, the theme of that year was the year of fitness. Now, you've heard me talk a lot about that recently, but basically in 2015, I said I was going to put my business on the back burner, or I was going to put it on autopilot. I was going to cut everything out of my business except for the bare minimum was only what was required to keep my business financially afloat and moving forward. Anything above that, I'm not going to do, but I'm going to do the bare minimum because I need a radical change in my lifestyle where I can go so far to the other extreme of putting my health and fitness first instead of putting my business as my number one priority in life. And of course, I'm very happy to say that I have successfully achieved the year of fitness, and it did for me exactly what I wanted it to do. And then over the last couple months, and this has really been going on for the last several years, I've been kind of struggling with what I will call an identity crisis or a professional identity crisis. And it actually may even be more personal identity crisis than I even am conscious of right now. And what do I mean by that? If you go back into the archives of this podcast, which was previously called Pursuing a Balanced Life, there was an episode. Let me see that episode number. 1 second. Okay. It was episode number 624. And that title of the episode was, What Do I Want My Life to Look Like in 10 to 20 Years from Now? So I've been dealing with this. What do I want for the future? And how much of what I'm doing now will carry into what I hope my life looks like 10 to 20 years from now? And so much of me struggles with this thought of, well, what I've always done over these past 8 years since I've started this business, what's generated income for me now is pretty predictable. It's stable. It's something that I could rely on. I don't see any end to the possibility of that income continuing to come in for the foreseeable future. I mean, nothing lasts forever, right? So you always have to pivot and change some things. But the fact is that the things that have been working up to this point have been so financially successful. How could I ever leave what I'm doing now? Sometimes it just doesn't seem to be responsible to think of leaving any of this on the table and moving and pursuing something different. Although, if you go back to the most recent episode before this one, episode 633, it was titled The Dark Days of December 2015. And you know, after listening to that in my heart, I feel a lot of what I will call holy discontent about what I do right now. It's not that it's bad. It's not that it's not fulfilled. It's not that I'm not finding fulfillment in the work that I'm doing, but I believe and feel strongly this urge that there is something different that I should pursue, and that it may, in fact, and I'm not sure that it will, but it could potentially involve a complete break from what I'm known for today, which is the podcast Answer Man. It could completely sever that tie. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But anyway, that's this whole idea. That's my history of themes. And the reason why I bring all of that up is because I want to talk to you about, well, the title of this episode, The Year of Identity. That is the theme that I've decided to go with for 2016. What is my identity moving forward? The reality is that since 2008, actually all the way back to 2006, I've been promoting myself. If you were to interview me on your podcast, which I do quite often, I'm interviewed by others, and when they ask me at the end of the episode, Cliff, thank you so much for all of this valuable wisdom, and the folks who are now listening have heard you, they want to know more about you, where can they find you? What do you suggest that they do to continue to follow you and your story and what you have to offer? And of course, my answer was always Podcast Answer Man. Go to podcastanswerman.com. And many of those interviews, if not most of them, have been to promote helping people launch a podcast. And that's become my identity in so many ways. And the reality is that I think that is what my mind says my identity is. But the reality is that there have been so many people who have told me that that's not what they follow me for. And if I think about Podcast Answer Man and the thousands of people who listen to Podcast Answer Man every single week, the reality is that almost every single one of those people already have a podcast, but they still listen to the podcast every single week. And I've been struggling with content for Podcast Answer Man. I've been making this commitment. I'm going to give you a new episode every single Friday at 5 a.m. And the reality is that I feel this compulsion sometimes to quote unquote live up to the name Podcast Answer Man for that podcast. And by that means that I'm going to be giving answers related to podcasting. That's what got that show started. That's what and every now and then when I veer away from that just a little bit, I get a couple negative 1-star reviews. It's like, this podcast really isn't about answering your technical questions to podcasting. It seems to be all about Cliff Ravenscraft and what's going on in his life. And sometimes that's useful, and sometimes I just wish he'd get back to the technical questions. And every now and then I would bring up some technical stuff related to podcasting, and then it's like, oh my gosh, Cliff, thank you so much for finally getting back to the true core of what this podcast is about. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not my heart, and that's not necessarily, I did that episode and I thought it was valuable and I brought it to you guys because it is Podcast Answer Man, But wow, it's almost as though when I get feedback like that, you're telling me that so much of the content that I've been sharing lately isn't something that you want. Now, the reality is I'm basing all of these things on the feedback of 2, 3, 4 people, right? But the reality is that thousands of people have never communicated that they don't find value in the other stuff. It's just that every now and then I get the vocal minority who aren't happy with Podcast Answer Man tell me, I wish it was more technical. And gosh, for a while I do more technical stuff, and then all of a sudden I lose all passion for it, and it bores me to tears, and I'm like, I want to talk about business and mindset and goal setting and productivity and time management and balance and finding health and fitness as an entrepreneur. I want to talk about all of these things that go into having a successful life, a successful business, a successful marriage, all of these things that we as entrepreneurs, business owners, we struggle with, or just husbands and fathers and just all of this stuff. I want to talk about that. And what happens is when I veer away from that and I'm like, let's just talk about podcasting stuff. These are the most frequently asked questions that new podcasters ask. This is the things that you need to do to include in your show notes. These are the things. That stuff, do I know that stuff? Do I have tons of value to offer? Yes. And that's why I do podcasting A to Z, to help answer those things. That's why I have learnhowtopodcast.com for free. That's why I have so many hours and hours of worth of content, hundreds of hours worth of content on podcastanswerman.com. But when it comes to podcasting and Podcast Answer Man, my passion is to talk about more than that, to help take your message, your business, and your life to the next level. But when I get 1-star reviews that just say this show just is not about podcasting, and sometimes I try to make it more about podcasting, and the more I try to make it about podcasting, the less I feel compelled to create the content, and my heart is just not in keeping it technical. And I'm reminded of something that Michael Hyatt said in a conversation with me, and I'm going to play a little audio clip for you here.
Well, I've told you before, this is why I listen to your podcast. You know, it's not because I need more technical information on podcasting. Right now, I mean, the way I'm doing podcasting doesn't really require anything of me technically. I just listen to you because I like the way that you think about life, how you approach the problems you're trying to solve, and just your voice. So you could be talking about anything, and I'd be interested.
And that, my friends, is what I want to do. That kind of content, what Michael's talking about, that's what I come alive to share. That's what wakes me up at 3:30 in the morning and makes me want to come down into my studio and record new content. And I can't sleep because I'm so darn excited about what I wanted to share. And what I wanted to share here was what clarity I've been receiving these past few days about what might potentially be in the future. And one is, hey, I want to tell you, I came up with a theme for 2016. It's the year of identity. And what does that mean? The year of identity is the year that I find my new identity, something that probably is way beyond Podcast Answer Man. Cliff Ravenscraft has value beyond teaching you how to podcast, beyond knowing the technical details of podcasting. I may continue to do podcasting A to Z for several more years to come. I have no idea. I know that I'll do at least 2 or 3 more this year. Podcastingatoz.com, check it out. I don't know how many I'll do in the future, but what I can tell you is that I believe finally what other people have been telling me. Cliff, there is more value in what you have to offer to people that is way beyond answering people's technical questions related to podcasting. And the way that you process your thoughts about problems that you face, setting goals and how you achieve them, the way you've radically transformed your approach to health and fitness and the results that you have so much more to offer to people than how to launch a podcast. And I'm convinced that I'm to step out of that as my main identity and find my new identity. Now, is my new identity pursuing a balanced life. Well, you know what? I don't even think that label is sufficient, because while I've been doing Pursuing a Balanced Life, this podcast for years, the reality is that people think, well, that's all about pursuing a balanced life. It's all about balancing faith and fitness. Well, it is, but it's more. And so I thought, do I call it, maybe I rebrand the show and it's the next level living, or taking life to the next level, something like that. I know that really would drive a couple people mad, wouldn't it? Some people really don't like the whole fact that I use the catchphrase taking things to the next level, but I don't care about that because it means a lot to me. But then I think about my friend Ray Edwards and the fact that he has the Ray Edwards Show. And I really like the fact that matter of fact, he's even thought about rebranding his show in the past to something that might be more in line with the description of what his show covers. But his show covers what's on Ray's heart to share. And I don't care if he's talking about copywriting or the latest whatever inspiration he has from reading the Bible, or if it's a new app like the Todoist app that I just listened to him talk about, and I've went and purchased a premium subscription for, and it's radically changing my life, and I'll probably talk about it in the future episode of my own. But the reality is because it's the Ray Edwards Show, Ray Edwards can talk about anything Ray Edwards wants to talk about, and nobody can say, well, this is called the Ray Edwards Show, but boy, Ray really doesn't present what he wants to talk about enough. No, it's the Ray Edwards Show. It's anything Ray wants to talk about. It could be anything. He could do long form conversations with people. He could have his segmented show with different segments. It's the Ray Edwards Show. He has the freedom to do whatever he wants. And I'm like, I dream of that. I'd like to do that. Pursuing a Balanced Life, it's almost as though Pursuing a Balanced Life, if it has that title, it probably has to do something with finding balance. And pretty much everything we talk about, that I would talk about anyway, could relate to that. But, it just seems like that still has a label on it, that it's just not broad enough for who I am, the identity that I have, and what value I bring to the world. I think it's beyond just finding balance. And besides, there's so many people out there that say there's really no such thing as balance in life. And so there's a lot of people who have preconceived ideas that say, man, I don't need that. Well, I do think that the things that I have here to share, the things that are on my heart, are things that I believe people do need, and they would listen to if it wasn't called Pursuing a Balanced Life. And of course, people ask me, so Cliff, how many shows do you do right now? And I'm like, well, okay, I'm currently producing 3 shows weekly. There's podcast Answer Man's every week. Family from the Heart right now is every week with my wife. And then I do a show called Pursuing a Balanced Life. It's usually weekly, except for December, right? December 2015. But I do 3 shows every single week. And I do have this other show, a 4th show right now that is still technically active. It's called Encouraging Others Through Christ. And that show just gets an episode whenever I feel led to do one. But, and I've had this conversation with so many people. I say, but man, I would dream of the day that I only had one podcast. Now, that's not true. I don't dream of the day when I don't do a podcast with my wife called Family from the Heart. So with the exception of that podcast, I love doing that with my wife every single week. Familyfromtheheart.com, check it out. But when it comes to me and my voice being the main voice of the show, my own self-hosted show, I don't like the idea of doing Encouraging Others Through Christ and Pursuing a Balanced Life and Podcast Answer Man. If I had my dream, I would do one show. And it would be the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. And that way I could talk about anything that's on my mind. I could do whatever format. I could do interviews. I could do solo. I could bring a co-host in. I could talk about any topic that's on my mind, on my heart to share with the world. That's the show. All right, so I'm back in the studio here, and I had to cut the episode right there because, well, originally, when it was still early in the morning, Wednesday, January 6th, as I was recording that, I continued on beyond that point and recorded probably another 20 minutes worth of that episode. And what happened was I was finished recording, I had opened up everything in Adobe Audition, ran my secret sauce on it, and I was going through and editing out a lot of the ums and all the other stuff that was not necessary as far as, me thinking of things and other stuff like that. So I typically will do a good edit on an episode. And then I got right to that place right here where I just cut out. And when I was in that space in the editing, I had this quote unquote wild hair idea. And the term wild hair idea will come to light in a future episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show when I share with you a conversation that Stephanie and I had recently that will continue this story. But anyway, so I had originally recorded 20 more minutes worth of content to wrap up this official, hey everybody, the Pursuing a Balanced Life is now the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. This show is being rebranded. These are my dreams. This is the year of identity. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be coming to you guys and sharing with you, blah, 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 blah. Now, here's the deal. I was in the editing process, and right where I cut off just now, I went in and deleted everything after that. And then I recorded something new because I had this harebrained idea that I was just going to cut ties immediately with the Podcast Answer Man podcast name, and I was going to let it take over the Podcast Answer Man feed. And by the way, before I play this, what you're about ready to hear is the new ending to that podcast because I was about ready to put it out. But this new ending that you're about ready to hear, I am not going to do what you are about ready to hear me talk about. However, I still wanted to share with you what was originally on my mind after I had almost completed the editing process and then re-recorded a new ending with this. And well, my friends, I am breaking into the recording here at this 27.5-minute mark because, well, I had recorded another 20 minutes of this episode, and it ended with kind of seeking the permission or at least the advice of my Podcast Answer Man audience. And I had recorded this little plea that says, hey, if there are 100 people who would email me and say, Cliff, I fully endorse and support you changing Podcast Answer Man to the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. After receiving my 100th piece of feedback that said, I support you out of the thousands of you who listen to Podcast Answer Man, then I would do it. But as I was editing this episode and I got right here to this point, and where actually I said this, I would do one show and it would be the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. And I just played that from the editing that I was doing. That was it. Let me play it one more time. Listening. I would do one show and it would be the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. Do you hear the passion in my voice when I said that? When I heard it, I'm like, okay, no, I'm doing it. It's effective. That's why I believe that I felt so compelled to get out of bed at 3:30 this morning, was so that I would come down here and come to this realization that this has been on my heart for so long, and I don't need the permission of other people to do it. That I know deep within my soul, deep within my heart, that this is the next step. This is putting a stake in the ground, the first step towards this new identity for 2016. And so here's what I can tell you. This right here, this is episode number 634 of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. But there is going to be quite a little bit of confusion from Podcast Answer Man because the most recent episode of Podcast Answer Man was episode number 430. And that podcast feed is immediately going to change to the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. So it's going to go from episode number 430 of Podcast Answer Man to 634 of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. It's it. I'm. You know what? Now I'm looking forward to every Friday at 5 a.m. You are going to get the Cliff Ravenscraft Show every Friday at 5 a.m. without fail throughout this entire year and for years to come probably. And I am delighted by it because I am now free. Not that I wasn't free before, but now I can do anything I want. And I'm excited about it. I've already pre-recorded some content for Podcast Answer Man. And those interviews will still fit because, well, you know what? It's anything I want this podcast to be. And I am convinced that an overwhelming majority of you are going to stay subscribed to what has been the Podcast Answer Man feed for the last 430 episodes before this. And if not, I'm willing to take that chance because this is what's on my heart. Will I continue to bring up podcasting content here? Absolutely. Podcasting is essential to my life right now. I've done 30 different podcasts with over 3,300 podcast episodes. You can bet I'm going to continue to talk about podcasting. Podcast Answer Man is going to still be my primary business right now. And so, matter of fact, everything is still going to land on Podcast Answer Man. And what I can tell you is that people who were subscribed to Pursuing a Balanced Life, they're going to continue to get a few episodes of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, and eventually I'll stop publishing the Cliff Ravenscraft Show on the old Pursuing a Balanced Life feed, and it will only continue here in the Podcast Answer Man feed, or the original Podcast Answer Man feed. I know this is all confusing, but it will work out in the end. I know it will, in spite of all of these things. I've done rebrandings in the past. It's not a big deal. And then from that point forward, I will have only one solo show. It will be the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. And it will be hosted for the time being on podcastanswerman.com, which, by the way, you may or may not know this. And I can't remember if this was in the part I edited out or the part that is already in the episode that I've just edited. Podcast Answer Man originally started on the domain cliffravenscraft.com. And after a couple months, I decided to go ahead and purchase podcastanswerman.com, and podcastanswerman.com became the primary domain. But for now, podcastanswerman.com and cliffravenscraft.com still go to the same place, and it will resolve eventually to podcastanswerman.com. That's still the primary business identity that I have right now, and it will continue that way for some point forward. But the podcastanswerman.com podcast will be the Cliff Ravenscraft podcast. Guys, I am super excited about this. And I will tell you right now, the content that you'll get over the next several weeks and months ahead on Friday mornings at 5 a.m. is going to be so much better than what I was going to slog through over the next several weeks and months ahead. So there you go. Guys, that's my journey this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will be back again next Friday at 5 a.m. with another episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, and I can't wait. Until then, I encourage you to take everything you do to the next level.
Helping you take everything you do to the next level.
And well, my friends, that is what I almost put into the podcast feed this past Friday. However, I didn't. It never got released. I ended up going in late Thursday evening and re-recording something completely different. The interview that I did with Todd Uterstadt, which I do think is an absolutely wonderful episode of Podcast Answer Man. And I'm delighted that I made that decision to go ahead and do that, because today, I'm actually recording this on Saturday, January 9th. And the reality is that a lot of things have happened since then. So I recorded that, and after I finished with it, I think I was up working on that one episode all the way until like 7 o'clock in the morning. And then finally I went up and went to bed and got some sleep for a couple hours. And I was just, I was just happy that I had it done. I woke up the next morning and I started working on my podcasting A to Z stuff with my students. And when I had an opportunity, I went upstairs and said, "Hey, Steph, I got to tell you what happened last night." She goes, "Yeah, I know you got up early this morning, didn't you?" And I told her why, and I told her about what I had done and why I was so excited about it. And I said, this is that thing we've been talking about for years, that I would, this dream of only having one podcast, and I'm doing it. I've made the decision. It's recorded, and it's going to be. I just need to tag it and upload it and schedule it to be released on Friday. But I'm really excited. And I told Stephanie, I said the only thing that could keep me from publishing this would be the fact that I'm getting ready to do my mastermind group call, and I'm going to tell them And, unless they talk me out of it, that's what I'm doing. And of course, Stephanie says, if they talk you out of it, I'm having words with them. And she's like, listen, no, this is in your heart. You do it. Exactly what you just said. Do that. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. And so I went to my mastermind group, and well, I'm going to play for you what I told them. This is exactly how I explained it to them. I got to tell you, I really feel that I have struggled over the years with my identity. I said this is the year of identity, right? And, we're all Christians here. So we all know that many times we Christians, we sometimes struggle with finding our identity in Christ, our true value in Christ. I think that you guys all understand that language. And certainly I've been no stranger to that struggle through my lifetime as well. I'm more confident in my identity in Christ today than I've ever been in my lifetime, which is awesome. But it's still an ongoing discovery of who I am in Christ and finding my value. Oftentimes, and I think this is something that many people, pretty much every business person I've ever gotten to talk to who's very authentic has told me that they also struggle with this. But oftentimes our identity is so closely tied to what we do for a living and how much we work. And so oftentimes the more I work, the harder I work, the better I feel about myself and the quote unquote more valuable I am to society. Or to just people at all. And if I all of a sudden decide to take an entire month off because I can, all of a sudden by the end of that month, I don't feel as valuable as a human being. And not only is there a little bit of that, I don't deal with that right at this very minute, but I have in the past. But the other thing is I find myself tying so much of who I am as a person and my value add to other people based upon where my income specifically comes from. And so much of my income has come from things like podcasting A to Z, equipment sales, digital products. So much so that I have allowed myself at times to limit my belief of my value is tied to the technical aspects of podcasting. And the thing is what people tell me over and over again, and I'm going to play a little bit of an audio clip right here, and you guys will all be able to hear this, I do believe. Listen to this.
Well, I've told you before, this is why I listen to your podcast. It's not because I need more technical information on podcasting. Right now, the way I'm doing podcasting doesn't really require anything of me technically. I just listen to you because I like the way that you think about life, how you approach the problems you're trying to solve, and just your voice. So you could be talking about anything, and I'd be interested.
The thing is Michael Hyatt there is talking about the fact of why does he listen to Podcast Answer Man every week? That's what he was talking about. And it's not because of the technical stuff. It's because of my voice. And the thing is over the last year, I've allowed my voice to kind of slowly dissipate in Podcast Answer Man. I don't feel now here's the thing. For the people who are coming to Podcast Answer Man for content related to podcasting and starting their podcast and keeping, being interested in podcasting stuff, I really feel like Podcast Answer Man is firing on all cylinders. But the reality is that a couple weeks ago, about a month and a half ago, I made a commitment that Podcast Answer Man was getting an episode every single week for the rest of 2015, and every single week in 2016, it would happen every Friday morning at 5 a.m. There would be a new podcast in the feed. And I will tell you that for the last several weeks, I've been slaving away for hours after hour after hour on Thursday trying to get that episode put together. Now, don't get me wrong. After 4, 5, or 6 hours, I've created a freaking awesome podcast episode that has absolutely zero voice from me. It has nothing to do with anything I'm passionate about. Zero, zilch, nada, nothing. And in fact, I even wonder if some of the people still listen that used to listen to it because of the fact that it was my voice and I was passionate about what I was talking about and the stories I was sharing and just insights into what's going on in my journey and what I'm discovering about business and all this other stuff in life. And the reality is that I've allowed myself, unfortunately, to steer the direction of Podcast Answer Man into a completely different direction based upon the feedback of about 4 or 5 people. I've been noticing some 1-star reviews popping up where I talked about putting my health and fitness first and stuff like that. And I started talking about some things in the beginning of the year that weren't necessarily technically related to podcasting, but they were my voice. And what happens is if you look at the 1-star reviews in Podcast Answer Man, they're all saying the kind of the same thing. It's like Cliff's undoubtedly got a lot to offer in the area of podcasting, but this podcast does not live up to the name Podcast Answer Man because he rarely talks about the technical sides of podcasting. He goes on and on about his own journey and stuff like that. And sometimes you get something of value, but it's not what I came here for. I know that I shouldn't let this thing, but this is actually, I think, critique that is valuable. It's true that Podcast Answer Man is not a podcast. I mean, when it started, it was a podcast about answering the technical questions about podcasting. It's not been that for a long time. And there have been thousands upon thousands of people who tell me they love the fact that I don't talk about the technical stuff because guess what? I would say that over 98% of every subscriber to Podcast Answer Man already has a podcast and doesn't need to know that stuff. They listen to me because of the same things that Michael Hyatt just said. And so here's the thing. Ray Edwards has The Ray Edwards Show. And I have a show that I do every week with Stephanie. It's called Family from the Heart. I love that. I will always do that for as long as Stephanie wants to do that. However, what I can tell you when it comes to solo shows, I have 3 that I produce, 2 of them on a weekly basis. One is called Pursuing a Balanced Life, and the other one is called Podcast Answer Man. And then I have this show out there called Encouraging Others Through Christ that really only gets something like once a year. But there are 2 shows called Pursuing a Balanced Life and Podcast Answer Man, and neither of them really are good enough titles to really uncover this new identity. So I was talking with Ray. I've said this, podcasting A to Z. I talk to all these people about their vision and goal for their podcasts and stuff like that. And every time somebody says, I want to start a different podcast, I want to start a second podcast, and they say their target audience is the same. And I always tell them, and I feel like a hypocrite, you shouldn't create a second podcast. If the target audience is the same, do the same podcast and put all the content that you would in the 2 different shows into one show if the target audience is the same. But I have these 2 different shows, but man, let me tell you, I would love to do one show. And there used to be a time when I used to do Business Tech Weekly, Social Media Serenity, Help I Got a Mac, and all of that stuff. And I remember the time when I canceled all of those other shows and brought all of that content to Podcast Answer Man, and I fell in love with Podcast Answer Man again. But the thing is I still believe that Podcast Answer Man, that I have quote unquote allowed myself, my identity to be tied to Podcast Answer Man. And Pursuing a Balanced Life, here's the other thing I know about that title and why that one isn't the greatest title for a podcast. There's a lot of people out there who, if they explain it the right way, I might agree with them. Dave Ramsey is very popular for saying there is no such thing as a balanced life. And there's a lot of other people that are that way. And really, there's some other folks out there who say, you know what, I'm not seeking for balance in my life. I feel pretty good about that. So I don't need that. But the reality is Pursuing a Balanced Life, that podcast isn't just about pursuing balance. It's a podcast about life. It's about business. It's about your message in the world. And so what is Pursuing a Balanced Life? It is about helping you take your message, your business, and your life to the next level. That's what I'm all about. And so the other day I was talking as like, I would love to do one podcast. That would be my dream. Instead, one solo podcast instead of 2. And it would be, if I could do it, it would be the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. Just because I don't think there's any other title. I know that early on, starting out, the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, who's Cliff Ravenscraft? But today, I think that there's enough of a name behind, of a reputation behind the Cliff Ravenscraft that the Cliff Ravenscraft Show could be pulled off. So I was talking with Stephanie, and I was sharing with her. I said, I talked with Ray, and the idea came. I said, Ray, I want to invite you to come on to my podcast, Pursuing a Balanced Life. But the thing is I want you to be a part of what will, from this point forward, be known as the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. And I'm really excited about it. And so I've been thinking about changing the name of the Pursuing a Balanced Life to the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. And what I told Stephanie was the idea, and I said, here's my dream. I would do this, and I would start doing the PABL as the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, and Podcast Answer Man, I would actually bring excerpts from the Cliff Ravenscraft Show and play them and heavily cross-promote the Cliff Ravenscraft Show in the Podcast Answer Man show. And I said, and over time, my goal would be at the place where some point down the road where I can find that, podcasting A to Z isn't my number one source of income, which, by the way, just as a side note, I do still plan on doing some A to Zs, at least for the rest of this year, but not 6. I probably will drop that back down to 3 or 4 this year. Anyway, that's a side note. But I said that my goal would be one day that the Cliff Ravenscraft Show would take over the Podcast Answer Man feed. The thing is Podcast Answer Man has 5 or 6 times the amount of subscribers as Pursuing a Balanced Life. And so, but the thing is, I could care less about the content that I'm currently creating for Podcast Answer Man. It means almost nothing to me except for the fact that it brings in income. And the thing is that's catering to the new content creators who are just thinking about launching a podcast. But it also fills my inbox with nothing but questions about cables and mixers and lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And so last night I went to bed, and this morning I woke up at 3:30 a.m. and I could not sleep. I am wide awake, and all I can think about is the excitement of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show and going down and recording and telling my audience about the change that I have prepared. And the fact I was so excited. Guys, I finally figured it out. I told you in the last episode, which was called The Dark Days of December 2015, I told you that I was looking for the theme for the new year. My new theme is the Year of Identity. And I explained everything that I have explained here to you guys today in that episode. And then I said, and this podcast from this point forward is now going to be the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. And I even then recorded about 20 more minutes worth of content. But what I went in the editing process, and I got to the point where I think I was 27 minutes into the episode, and I had just said, and I said, in my wildest dreams, my dream would be that the Cliff Ravenscraft Show would take over the Podcast Answer Man feed. And at that moment, while I was editing what was a completed episode, I was editing it, I decided to delete the final 20 minutes of that episode, and I hit the record button and said, guys, I'm breaking in with new recording here. In fact, in the original end to this podcast, I talked about my dream of the future, but man, I just heard my voice and my dream, and I'm like, I was about ready to seek people's permission, but I'm doing this. Effective immediately, Pursuing a Balanced Life from this point forward is now known as the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. I'm taking the numbering system from that, but the Cliff Ravenscraft Show is also taking over the Podcast Answer Man feed. From this point forward, the Podcast Answer Man podcast will from this point forward be known as the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. So there you go. That's the bomb. Initial thoughts. Well, my friends, that is exactly the words that I chose to use to explain the decision that I had made up to that point about the future of the Podcast Answer Man name for this podcast, or for the Podcast Answer Man podcast, since this is a crossover also for the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. And I bet you at this point, if you're still listening, I'm sure that you're probably interested to know, what did my mastermind group have to say about that? And then whatever it is my mastermind group had to say, what do you think my wife maybe had to say about what they had to say? If any of that sounds interesting to you, I want to let you know that this is part 1 of what will at least be a 2-part series. And in the next episode, I will share with you some of what my mastermind group said, then some of what my wife and I had in our conversation in a recent episode of Family from the Heart. And I will also give you some updates about some conversations that I've had with some friends. So if that sounds interesting to you, then you definitely want to check out the very next episode. And here's what I've just decided, that this is, of course, as I said, a 2-part series. And I know that I said I would return Podcast Answer Man to its regularly scheduled programming in episode number 433. Not now. I'm going to go ahead and continue this story. And the next episode, next week for the Podcast Answer Man feed, I am going to continue this series with another crossover episode. So basically, if you want to hear the continuation of this story, go ahead and check out the next episode, which is the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, episode number 635, or you can check it out in the Podcast Answer Man feed. It will also be episode number 433 of Podcast Answer Man. And who knows, this could be a part of how I am able to cross-promote. Remember, I had mentioned the idea of including excerpts from the Cliff Ravenscraft Show into Podcast Answer Man from time to time, and I probably will still do that. Although I can see times when I might record an episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, and I'm like, every single word of that needs to also go out to the Podcast Answer Man audience as well. And I could create those episodes as crossover episodes, where it's like this episode, where it's an episode of both shows. But one thing I do know, and I just want to set anybody's mind at ease, is a couple things. Number one, I know that Podcast Answer Man, the podcast, will continue on separately from the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. Now, Pursuing a Balanced Life is an old brand that is being retired, and it is being replaced with the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. So that these two shows are going to function separately from one another. So if the kind of content that you're hearing here in this episode sounds appealing to you, you're going to continue to hear some of it in the Podcast Answer Man feed. However, if you want to make sure that you get every single episode that is kind of like me, authentically, transparently sharing with you my journey and my conversations with my friends and anything else that is really passionate to my heart and the lifestyle of being an entrepreneur, a husband, a father, and everything else in the journey of taking your message, your business, and your life to the next level, then you definitely want to go over and subscribe to the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. And by the time this episode gets released into the Podcast Answer Man feed, the Pursuing a Balanced Life Show has already been rebranded, and you should be able to just go into the iTunes podcast directory and type in Cliff Ravenscraft, and you will find the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. Go ahead and subscribe to that podcast. I do know that Podcast Answer Man is going to continue at this point. I am confident that I'm going to continue to do several more sessions of Podcasting A to Z. I probably won't do 6 this year, but I'm still going to at least do 2 or 3 more. I do know that Podcasting A to Z is likely to continue even beyond that, maybe not as many as I've done in the past. I might get to the place where I only do 1 or 2 of those a year. And I have some other exciting things that I am going to be launching. And I'll talk about that in future episodes of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. That's where I'm going to talk about all the stuff in my world. And I'm going to continue Podcast Answer Man in this content, and it will have content that is related to those of you who are either just starting out in your podcast, or even those of you who do still have a podcast already. You already have an existing podcast, but you're looking for things to expand your mindset of what you can do with your podcast and how you can improve your podcast, and conversations, learning from the experience of other podcasters like I've been sharing in here. Podcast Answer Man is going to be a part of my business brand moving forward. I'm confident in that for the next 5, 10, and maybe even 15, 20 years from now. And if you want to find out how that change in my heart came about, and why I wasn't so excited about that prospect before, but why I am very excited about that prospect now, then I encourage you to check out the next episode of this show. And one more thing before I wrap up and end this episode, just real quickly, I want to let you know that the next session of Podcasting A to Z will start on Monday, March 14th, 2016. I've already opened up the registration for that course. Head over to podcastinga2z.com. If you would like to have me as your personal coach for a 4-week process, I'll walk you through every single step in the process of launching a podcast. If you would like to have me as your personal coach walking you through that, or if you would just like to have me as your personal coach where you can ask me questions about anything you want to ask me for an entire 4-week period of time, even if you already have a podcast. And I'm even going to go ahead and say this because your one-on-one connection with me will not distract anybody else in the class from what they're doing. If you just want to talk about your business pursuits and ask me things about, well, the things you know that I do and how do I do them, and you want to have access to me for 4 weeks, go ahead and sign up for the next session of Podcasting A to Z over at podcastinga2z.com. Anyway, friends, thank you so much for tuning in. I will be back next week with another crossover episode where I'll continue the story. Until then, I encourage you to take everything that you do in life to the next level.
Helping you take everything you do to the next level.